Welcome to the VegasInsider.com Bet and Collect podcast.
I'm here to collect.
Hosted by Kevin Rogers.
Who's the big winner here tonight at the casino?
Your source for the best sports betting information to help you dominate your bookmaker.
Thought you was laying.
I'm laying. No, I'm taking it. I was taking it.
It's time to bet and collect.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Bet and Collect podcast here on VegasInsider.com. Kevin Rogers and Tony Mejia with you for Thursday, June 18th, and we are counting down the days towards the NBA returning at the end of July. And to talk more about some of the latest news in the NBA, we got a guy that talks a lot of NBA. He does it for ESPN. Jorge Sedano, part of the NBA and ESPN broadcast, also hosts a radio show in ESPN Los Angeles. And he is joining us here on the Bet and Collect podcast. And George, just so many storylines to go over. First, I want your thoughts on everything that Kyrie Irving was thinking and doing over the last few days.
So here's what I would say. I think that Kyrie, the message is in the right place. Like, I'm not going to dispute that by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, we all see what's transpiring, and everyone has been very emotional about these situations. However, look, I've had this conversation because far be it from me, even though I'm a minority, to tell a black person how to feel about what's going on in this country right now and what's been going on for 400 years. But I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of my colleagues, both young and old, right? Both on air and off. And for the most part, the consensus has been that if you have a platform, you utilize it. You know, I thought Michael Wilbon said it best on PTI the other day, where he says, if someone gives you a microphone, you don't turn that away. And you look at guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, John Carlos, right? Tommy Smith. They utilize their platform and still were able to compete in their specific sports while raising the awareness. And LeBron is the perfect example of this, right? Within his own sport, that you can do both. You can play and you can also start more than a vote, which is to create awareness and register people to vote and do things of that nature, right? We've seen that transpire. And not only do we have that, Kevin, but we have a league led by Adam Silver, who may be the most player-friendly commissioner we've ever had in any sports all time, right? Where he's been very open to letting players demonstrate and expressing themselves in any way, shape, or form. And the pushback that I've gotten from some of the detractors have been, well, if you bring sports back, it's a distraction. I think if you are amplifying the message, I think that it won't be, because it's going to be pronounced. And I think that the other part of the detractors' comments have been, well, you know, they've done the T-shirts and stuff like that before, and what has it really done? Well, again, I think that the NBA and the NBA Players Association is committed to doing things that are more pronounced than just T-shirts. Not that the T-shirts weren't effective to bringing awareness, but not as effective as one would hope, right? So I think that this is going to be something that the league is certainly very sensitive to and understands the positioning of their players. And I think that between them and the Players Association, they will come to an understanding. And look, if players don't feel comfortable coming to the bubble or the campus environment for this reason or for other reasons, including safety or family and things of that nature, all that stuff will get discussed within the parameters and the discussions that the league and the Players Association are going to have. And they'll be able to resolve those in some way, shape, or form as well.
I know that, George, that Kyrie was the messenger in this whole thing on that phone call a few nights ago, and Dwight Howard was on it, Carmelo was on it, among other players, about 80-something players on it. How different would this be if this was LeBron James leading the call and saying, I think that we should sit out because of social injustice and make a statement that way? How different would it be if it was a LeBron or a James Harden? We know Kyrie's a star, but LeBron is the guy in the league. What if he did this?
I think it would certainly resonate differently. I don't think there's any question about that. And again, I'm not trying to minimize Kyrie's message, but to your point, when you talk to people in the league, other players, you know, people that are around him a lot, the thing that comes up about Kyrie is lack of consistency. I had Kendrick Perkins on my radio show yesterday, who played in the NBA, played with and against Kyrie, right? And he talked about the issue that Kyrie's having here. And he made it seem like it was his, not that his messaging wasn't in earnest, but that his reasoning was somewhat disingenuous. And he was saying that Kyrie was all okay on playing in the bubble on June 5th and then changed his mind when Adam Silver and the league told him that injured players would not be allowed in the bubble because they want to limit the amount of people that are going to be on the campus environment, right? Or in the campus environment. So he feels like it was an emotional response. And Amin Al-Hassan was on the air today on our radio station and talking about how there was a call prior to the call that was publicized on Friday that was smaller in nature and did not have Chris Paul, who is friends with LeBron and who is also the president of the Players Association. And Amin said on our air on radio today that he spoke to a couple of players that were on that first call, and there was a lot of Kyrie lamenting LeBron, right? And talking about how LeBron, basically LeBron this, LeBron that, LeBron wants to do things. And he mentioned LeBron's name a ton, whereas on that second call, he didn't do it as much. And so Amin is starting to think, like, again, that like Kendrick, that some of this may be emotional, the reaction to it, not the message, but that the reaction by Kyrie and the change of heart may be somewhat emotional. Again, that's what those guys are saying, and those guys are pretty plugged in.
To me, I got a lot of relief from seeing this plan on paper, and it seems extremely well thought out. Guys who don't want to work right now don't have to. They'll lose game checks. But those who will have an environment that should be set up well to do so. What did you make of some of the details there that were released by ESPN and other outlets?
Well, look, forget about what I think. The guy who's the foremost expert on this stuff, Dr. Fauci, thinks that the NBA's protocols are the safest available among the professional sports here in the United States, right? Not to say that anything is foolproof, but I'll take that guy's word for it over anyone else's. But yeah, when I saw it, I also felt a lot better and understood now where Dr. Fauci was coming from, Tony. So this isn't going to be easy. And Adam Silver was pretty honest about that the other day on that video conference that he did with Mike Greenberg on ESPN. And it may not be for everyone. Hence, to your point, if guys don't want to do it, they don't have to show up, but they're not going to get paid unless basically they have some sort of excused absence or a doctor's recommendation and things of that nature from guys who may be compromised from their immune system's perspective. So, yeah, I feel good about it. I think that they're taking every safety measure possible. Even the interactions with the media will be limited, both tier 1 and tier 2 in a lot of ways. Tier 1 will have more access to players, but they will still have to socially distance. They'll be not 6 feet, 12 feet away from players is my understanding. And the tier 2 media, they're not going to have any face-to-face interaction with players or coaches or league officials, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be in the stands. They'll be doing stuff from Zoom calls and things of that nature that will be set up. And, you know, the only people that will have direct access will be people who are subjected to the same protocols that the players and the league will be, which will be the broadcast crew, those who get chosen to be a part of this from ESPN and Turner. And I know Turner won't be there, at least out of the gate, it seems like, according to some reports. Kevin Harlan said that he expects that they would be there for the conference finals potentially. So, you know, we haven't gotten our protocols yet. We don't know who's going to be there yet from an ESPN perspective. We're going to have those meetings in a couple of days. I specifically haven't been asked to go, but I know that the media that will be part of the broadcast will have the access and the face-to-face interactions, because that particular group is going to deal with the same protocols, the daily testing, the temperature checks, all that stuff. They're going to have those bracelets that you're going to wear that are basically fobs, right? Key fobs, being able to monitor how many times you've been tested, when you've been tested last, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel good about it as I kind of read the Cliff Notes version of the 113 pages. I didn't go through all 113 pages yesterday, Tony, but to answer your question, yeah, I felt better about it. I do think there's some funny things too, right? Like basically the snitch line, who's going to go out there and snitch on other players who aren't wearing masks. And again, you have to wear masks while indoors, or not on the court, but like at the hotel and areas like that. Outdoors, they don't have to do that. But yeah, those kind of things will be interesting because let's face it, that stuff plays well, particularly amongst the NBA's fan base, because we're all in on the jokes, particularly on social media.
Yeah, potential 10-day quarantine if you're caught on that stitch line. But I mean, Orlando doesn't have the greatest nightlife, and especially now given the pandemic. What's it like to be out in LA for all of this, considering the Lakers and the Clippers and James Harden and the fact that a lot of the NBA now has moved to be LA centric? What's it been like from the start of things to the pause button to now as we are hopefully about to relaunch?
Well, I've been really vocal about how well that the local LA leadership and the governor here in California have handled the pandemic. And it's funny because when the stuff got put out that they were going to extend the stay-at-home orders, particularly through the end of July, or the safer-at-home orders, I got a lot of texts from people and friends I have all over the country, including Florida, who are like, oh, I can't believe you got to deal with it. And what I said to them was, and this is honest to God, is that I felt good about it because there was real thought put into this, at least from an LA perspective. And they were working directly with the teams and the media to make sure to get the messaging out, when it came to a sports perspective and just a general public perspective. But little by little, over time here, things have become more open. And they are strict guidelines, whereas businesses, if they're available, they have to follow the strict guidelines put out there by the local and state government, and they have to meet those. And if they don't meet those requirements, they're getting shut down. So there's no games out here in California when it's come to this. And I think for the most part, they've done a nice job of managing it. Yes, the numbers are up. They're up mostly everywhere because of the testing. What you're seeing is the positive percentage rate is not up significantly here in LA. I can't speak to the rest of California, but I do believe that that's the case. And I know the hospitalizations are down significantly here in LA. I believe we were at a number yesterday that was the lowest since April 6th, if I recall correctly. So I feel good about the way people here have handled things. My understanding is that players I've spoken to that have been here have felt really good about it too.
George, on the court, sticking with the Lakers and the Clippers, we were looking forward to a no-travel Western Conference Finals at Staples Center. Just flip the court, flip the locker rooms with the Lakers and Clippers. Yeah. We're not going to have that now, obviously, but you can still have those two play in the Western Conference Finals in Orlando. Whose chances do you like to go further? I know that you are on ESPN LA, the flagship of the Lakers, and you're obviously very close to them. But between these two teams, after all this time off, Kawhi, Paul George have had a lot of time off, load maintenance, not a big deal. What do you think about these two teams moving forward in the playoffs?
Real quick, before I get to that, I do want to tell you this, Kevin, that in the 113 pages, it did talk about, or at least alluded to, that if things in the campus bubble environment seem to require the ability to loosen things, that they can loosen things. And while I believe we're going to play the entire playoffs in Orlando, because I think that, the rest of the country, we can't count on what's happening in the rest of the country. If there is a Hail Mary of sorts and things change in the rest of the country or in the particular states where the conference finals and finals would be potentially held, I wouldn't completely rule it out as 100% that they couldn't play in their home arenas. I don't put much stock into it. I'm not an absolutist, right? So I don't say 100% that we're going to see this through in Orlando. I would say like 99.99999%, but I do want to make sure that that's out there because there was that kind of wiggle room in the language there. And also, by the way, on the flip side, there was the wiggle room to tighten things if necessary within the constructs of Orlando. But to your question about the Lakers and the Clippers, man, honestly, it is as big a toss-up as I've seen, okay? I think the Clippers, I feel like they have the inherent advantage of their top 5 guys are the guys that I would pick. If I was picking the best 5 on each roster, like I would say that the Clippers have more guys. If we're saying Kawhi, Paul George, Anthony Davis, and LeBron are the top 4 in any order, the 5th guy is going to be a Clipper, and the 6th guy is probably going to be a Clipper, and maybe the 7th guy is going to be a Clipper. So I think that in that sense, they have an advantage. But LeBron is so good at getting guys around him to be better. And I think he's not only done that clearly with Anthony Davis, and he's fed him more than any other teammate he's had in history, but I think that he's allowed those other guys, right, to really flourish as well. And, sometimes it's Kyle Kuzma, though there's been some issues with him at times too as far as chemistry. But whether it's Danny Green, Avery Bradley, even Dwight, right? But I think the question folds back to this, which is, are Avery Bradley and Dwight going to be part of this, right? I think that That's a real question at this point. So let's just say on the surface that everybody's involved and all the teams will have their complete rosters. It's hard for me to bet against LeBron at this point because he's playing as well as he's played in a really long time, particularly on the defensive end. And Anthony Davis, for as much as I mentioned earlier that the Clippers have the advantage on players 5, 6, and 7, they don't have an answer for Anthony Davis. Montrezl Harrell is not that guy. As good as he is on offense, he's not a guy that I would look at defensively that can limit Anthony Davis. So I am curious to see in that toss-up which side prevails, the side of depth or the side of the incredible advantage the Lakers would have with Anthony Davis. So I picked the Lakers at the beginning of the season, so I'm going to stick to that. I had Lakers winning the championship and beating the Clippers in 7 in the conference finals, so I'm going to stick to that. But, man, it's as flimsy a pick as I've ever made.
I'm leaning toward part of 2020 requiring Joakim Noah to return as the X factor to everything, as he's apparently about to do. Let's talk East with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons 10-9 in playoff games together, and you have the Bucks as a prohibited favorite. But all of these teams are right there, the Celtics and Heat, and even the Pacers, if Victor Oladipo can be healthy. Could be a crapshoot. What do you think about the conference?
The Bucks were rolling, man. And it's wild, right? So this happens, and obviously things change. And Giannis is by far the best player in the Eastern Conference. But to your point with Philly's so weird to me, Tony, because it's, as much as I picked the Lakers to win, I had Philly in the finals in the preseason too. And that doesn't look so great now. But they're going to be healthy now. I don't love their roster construction, but they seem to me to have the largest variance of any of the teams in the Eastern Conference. I could totally see them being in the finals because they're built to beat Milwaukee, but I could see them getting destroyed in the first round too by Boston, even though they've had some success against Boston in the regular season because they're just so inconsistent, right? There's so many factors and variables there. We were talking about Brett Brown maybe being out as the coach before all this happened, and they're not listening to him and all this stuff, which still all could be the case. But I just think they have so much variance that I don't know how to peg them. But to your point, the Heat, the Celtics, the Raptors, and the Sixers, I'll put them in this category. None of them fear the Bucks. And I think that when you look at the West, right, for as much as, maybe we give Houston a puncher's chance because of the crazy small ball stuff, and Russ was playing really well at the end, with James. But in the West, it's the Lakers and Clippers, as we've talked about, right? We know, and everyone probably has a healthy fear of LeBron and Kawhi. But I don't think Giannis is there yet because he does have holes in his game, particularly from an offensive standpoint, right? So until those holes are patched up, I think that a lot of teams in the East will tell you this, and I've had these conversations. They basically all say some version of this. Get me to the last 5 minutes, and I like my chances against them. And that seems to be the overwhelming feeling from the contenders in the Eastern Conference.
And also the Bucks don't have any home court advantage since they're playing in Orlando. So it should be very interesting. George Sedano, always great work. NBA and ESPN. ESPN Los Angeles host as well. You can find George on Twitter at Sedano. Simple as that. And George, thank you so much for the time.
Kevin, I'm like Beyonce and Madonna now. Just one name.
Hey, make it easy. Make it easy for everybody. George, thank you so much. Good to catch up with you. We'll talk to you soon.
Kevin, Tony, thanks for having me on. Stay healthy, stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.
We'll stay in the Western Conference and talk about the Phoenix Suns, the last team into the 22-team field, I guess we can call it. And we're going to break down the Suns and their chances with Duane Rankin, who covers the Suns for the Arizona Republic. And Duane, obviously, Phoenix, the last team in. What are the thoughts with the Suns right now where it seems almost like an insurmountable deficit, 8 games to play and 6 back to get in the playoffs?
How are they feeling about it? Guys are excited about it. They do. I mean, they understand it's insurmountable. I mean, even though it's the whole get within 4 and then you might can do a play in, but still that's asking teams to bottom out ahead of them. I think this is a matter of for them, hey, let's get some continuity back. Let's end the season healthy. They haven't been healthy all season. I think this is a way for them to end it that way. And this format, obviously, when you look at the teams but all the circumstances that go into it, all the outer stuff, You know, all the guidelines guys got to go through in the bubble and all those factors. You don't know how guys are going to play. What may affect one may not affect another. So the testing, there's a lot of variables in this that are beyond what they would normally be. So which leads to some very unpredictable stuff that could possibly happen. And I think with Phoenix, it's just a matter of, from people that I've talked with, excited to go, eager to go, you know, but understanding the situation at hand. But, you know, you'd rather be playing than not playing, considering this format. So they'll play and see what happens.
See, what I'm curious about, Duane, is, I mean, when you just even compare them to Washington has got to fight it out with Orlando or Brooklyn. I know one of those still is to clinch a 7th seed, but there's only a few teams there where Phoenix has got to go against 5 different teams. If they were 6 back and Memphis was an 8th, then you say, okay, well, they got to go 8-0 or 7-1, and then Memphis has to fall apart. But you got to jump 5 teams, which I think is the toughest part, as opposed to just being the 6 back.
One of my biggest things has been the schedule. Who do they play? When I looked it up, it was 11 out of the 21 teams remaining that they didn't finish their season series with. You know, Lakers, Clippers, Mavericks, Jazz. That just doesn't. Miami, Philly. It's just, you know, if they're going to do it that way, it's going to be some tough games they're going to have to play. They've already finished their season series with San Antonio, with Sacramento, and with Memphis. So it isn't like you can knock them out and then, you know, climb that way. I think the only team, if that's how the schedule is based. But the challenge is obviously greater for Phoenix and than Washington. Washington's got, you know, they could close that gap. But the 4 games in between, the 4 or fewer games, you know, gives you a little hope if you're Phoenix. Because if there wasn't that, then what would be the point in doing it? You know, 8 games, 6 back, you lost the season series to Memphis. You know, it would be like, why are we doing this? But there's a little glimmer of hope, but it's little for sure.
What do you think about the fact that, I mean, obviously you're included in this, and like me and Kevin have been talking about there probably not being this amount of demand regarding the teams that are included in this. I mean, we might have just gotten 16 if the New Orleans Pelicans were 16, because everybody knows that Zion Williamson is, in essence, commanding this. He's obviously not demanding this, but he's commanding this. Like, their ratings went up when Zion debuted. The fact that Zion's so close to a playoff berth is going to drive traffic to the NBA early, but obviously the NBA is going to be commanding traffic regardless of this, because we're going to get a major sport back as early as the last day of July and into early August, and we'll see what happens. But look, here's the deal in terms of the Phoenix Suns and the fact that they're involved in this, because honestly, it becomes one of those things where, yes, we probably put them to rest after what San Antonio was able to build. And San Antonio's been in the playoffs for 2 decades in a row. But you do have Devin Booker. You do have DeAndre Ayton.
Kaminsky's back. You know, like I said, this be the first time if you know, you don't know what would happen in a training camp. Because, again, guys haven't done anything as far as up and down in a team format since March. So you don't know how the body's going to react. I'm curious to see how the training camps go, what they do, how much they do, trying to get ready. I'm talking about the ones that's supposed to be at the city sites or within that area before they go to Orlando. Curious to see how all that plays out. But Phoenix, you got a young team. And when you got a young team, you know, you think they may get acclimated a little quicker physically than a team maybe that has a bunch of veterans that have been sitting or just doing workouts or to stay right. I mean, you know, there's been ways to figure out what to get that workout in and get that basketball back in. But Phoenix has got everybody back, and you know, you got guys on their team that, you know, that's up for contracts. Bane's unrestricted free agent. He wants to play. You know, this would be another opportunity to show what his worth is. And so there's a lot of incentives beyond just coming back together as a team for a lot of these guys. So there's a lot that they can get out of this. And obviously getting paid helps. There's a lot that reasons to go back out on the floor. But there's a lot of dangers, obviously, as well with the virus.
From that standpoint, I mean, you're obviously one of the best coached teams in the league. We know what that cohesiveness can do. But, like, as somebody who follows the NBA the way I do, you don't see an identity from Phoenix. Everybody understands an identity from most teams and most of the better teams. But the fact that Devin Booker was so outspoken as the star of that team, but isn't really recognized as a star, and you have DeAndre Ayton as the number one pick just coming up and having dealt with injury issues, like who is actually the alpha on this team? Explain to us what this team will bring to Orlando from a dynamic standpoint. And I think you mentioned, I mean, they probably view themselves as a team that is probably not going to get that 8 seed. They're probably not even get the 9 seed. So they're there for personal benefit and to see where they're at as a unit. But again, like this is one of the most unique teams going to a setting that is going to be a campus atmosphere. And what are you going? Like, what are you envisioning?
We don't know what we're going to do yet because we got to figure out what the media is going to have access to. This isn't just, let's go to the bubble and play. There's a lot of restrictions. And, we've got to figure all that out before we make a decision on what we're going to do as far as us as a newspaper personally. But as far as identity, I mean, I think Phoenix does have an identity. They like to play up tempo. They like to play fast, play with pace. They're in the top 10 in pace in the league. They score. I mean, they put up 115, they can put up 150, 120, 130. They share the ball, 0.5 offense. Booker is obviously the guy within that, but Rubio obviously sets guys up. Ayton, I think that for Ayton, this is a situation where the guys only played 30 games. This is an opportunity for him to okay, let's at least get some more games in, figure out how he fits in amongst this new group. Suns had 9 new players that they brought in. There's a lot of, okay, Mikal, can he play a 4? He's been playing a 4. They've got small ball. They've talked about Devin playing him more at the point. There's a lot of things that they can try, but the identity is play fast, play with pace on offense, and defensively, try to contain the ball with something that they haven't been good at. Offensively, they have an identity. Defensively, it's a matter, okay, you got to be more disciplined. Suns are 27th, I believe, in the league in fouls. You can't be that. Win with the margin of error that they have anyway is pretty small. So there's a lot of things that they can work on here within these next couple months, even if they only play 8 games, that can benefit them down the road and in terms of building towards next year. And I don't think you can go into the mindset of, we're just playing and not think you don't have a chance. Because if you do that, then the other teams aren't thinking like that. They're looking to handle their business. So that's the approach with it. I don't believe it is, but if that is it, it's going to get ugly for Phoenix. But I don't think they're looking at it that way. You can't. I mean, if you're a competitor and you think that, okay, there's a glimmer of hope but you can make it. I mean, Monty had talked about when he was with the New Orleans and they were so many games out with so many left. They ended up making the playoffs. And this was before the pandemic. So I'm sure he's going to come back to them with that story about that it is possible. Highly unlikely, but possible.
Duane, Monty Williams is obviously the most accomplished coach that Devin Booker has played for since being drafted by the Suns. And not to look past the 8 games and look ahead to next season, but Golden State's going to be better next season. You know what the Lakers are. You know what the Clippers are. Sacramento is an improving team. What's the future like for this Phoenix team that has 2 good young stars? Ayton averages double-double. We know what Booker can do. Where's the light at the end of the tunnel in this Pacific Division with the 2 LA teams, with Golden State, who's going to be better, and an improving Sacramento team?
The Phoenix has a decision to make. Do they keep the core that they have right now and just move forward with it? Or do they do what they did last year and make a bunch of moves and add pieces and trade pieces and move pieces and don't re-sign pieces? You believe Oubre is going to get better? Do you believe that Ayton's going to get better? Ayton, to me, is the guy that has to raise his level because Devin is going to be able to get his regardless. The guy is too good of a scorer. You could put any system on the court, and Devin's going to get 24, 25, 26, score 30 multiple times, be able to hit 40. He's capable of obviously scoring 70 points as he did against Boston, a few years back. But Ayton, I believe, is a huge factor. I think that there are free agents out there. Grant in Denver, he would be perfect in Phoenix. They need a 4-man so they don't have to have Mikal Bridges playing a 4. can go back to being a 3. If they could get a couple guys in free agency that could start and make some of these couple of these guys that are starting come off the bench to help your bench get stronger, you have an improved team with a coach that is now going to be 2 years in instead of one and done. So there's a lot of that, where they can look at, or they can just say, you know what, just blow it up again. And I think these 8 games, although they may not lead to making the playoffs, is going to, help determine on who they got a lot of team option guys that they're looking at. So like Kaminsky being one of them, I think that's going to be huge. The backup point guard would help. I'm talking about a guy that like Van Vliet in Toronto, a guy that maybe could come in and be a bench guy, come off the bench for his first year, but by the time Rubio is ready to, his contract's up, you throw this guy in, and he could be your starter for the next 5 years. They need to address that. That's what great teams have. Great teams have guys who could start somewhere else, but they're coming off the bench for you. And Phoenix has to have a situation where guys are willing to stay and make that sacrifice in order for the sake of the team. They don't have a LeBron. You don't have someone that a Kawhi, but you've got Devin and DeAndre, and you could throw Kelly in there. He's a star right now, but his athleticism is off the charts. I mean, here's things that he can do that simply no one else on the team can do. So there's a lot to work with, but is it enough to work with to stick with this? Or do they need to do some things in the offseason, free agency, and draft to see if they can get better? And that's some huge decisions to make in the offseason, and that's why I think these 8 games are meaningful.
After Duane, we found out last week that the NBA was coming back, and July 31st, Orlando, the bubble, all this other stuff. Now, the last few days, it seems like there are players questioning whether or not they want to play in Orlando. I'm not talking about the Suns. I'm talking about players all over the league. What do you think is going to happen over the next few weeks if they find out maybe there's more COVID cases in Central Florida, or maybe, there's not another wave coming, but do you think players would sit this out?
If they've been talking about trying to players sit out without, consequences. If they reach that point, then obviously there's some players that are thinking about not playing. If you're the league, you're going to force a guy to play if he doesn't feel comfortable playing. And then that leads to, how another guy handles it. It'd be interesting to see if this happens, what guys are saying no. No, I'm not going to do this. And a lot of it, and some of it is also with what's going on, at least from what you're seeing with George Floyd and with the protests, and then there's the arrangements, not having visitors until after the first round of the playoffs, and a lot of this is being reported, and it's just like when the Players Association said, okay, we agreed to discuss this more. I think what you're seeing is what's wanted to discuss more of. I think players have given it more thought, and now trying to figure out, okay, has this worked for me personally? And this is a lot. This is not going to be an easy thing. When they reached the point where they said, all right, we know that we're going to have to deal with this virus, but we need to play anyway, that was crossing the threshold. And so now, how they move forward is going to be pivotal. What players decide or really questioning it now as we get closer to this date. But I had talked with people and with people about this, and they didn't think this would be a quick thing. They didn't think it would be this automatic. Oh, the board of governors agree. Boom, let's just move in. They didn't think it would be. They thought that there would be more things to discuss, and we're getting into the more things that are being discussed right now. And this is not normal at all. So anything that's happened shouldn't be a surprise, because this situation is far from being normal.
I'm right here in Orlando. This is my backyard. So it basically becomes one of those things where you're sitting there and you're saying, yeah, I understand why the Lakers and the Clippers and the Bucks would do this, and everybody would do this. And obviously you've got 22 teams over 16, and they didn't want to do just 16. And I think me and Kevin are in unison in saying they didn't want to do 16 because Zion wasn't in the 16. What do you think that the Suns will do from a responsibility standpoint? because it isn't just you. Understandably, it's just your franchise and moving forward. When it's just your franchise and moving forward, and you're playing game 70 to 82 in a regular season, when you're being asked to go to Orlando, Florida, for an unprecedented situation of 8 games where you're sequestered. How do you think your team is going to handle that? I mean, you're around this group. You know who the leaders are. What would you forecast is going to happen?
Again, with it being so unprecedented, there's no way to really determine how guys will respond to that. I mean, when you're in a routine, okay, you follow the routine. You get up early. Sons usually go to work early, come in, practice, go home. It's a young team, but if they're going to put the guidelines on guys to say, okay, this is what you have to do in order to make this work, and they're making safety the priority on it, and again, the daily testing, if it becomes routine, I think guys will fall in line with routine. But it's not going to be easy. I mean, this isn't going to be easy for any team. You look at things that got young guys, so the perception may be, oh, well, they're young, they're not going to be able to deal with it. But if the priority, I think a lot of it's going to fall on the coach, because if you have, I guess, 35 people they're supposed to be able to bring as a team, I think a lot of it's going to be on the coach and trying to get them to focus on whatever task that they have in mind of trying to achieve in the 8 regular season games. So I think a lot of it's going to be on Coach Williams to get guys to do the best that they can in terms of making the adjustments. He's going to be huge in this whole process.
How has that been? Because obviously I covered Monty Williams as a player in Orlando, Duane, bro. I'm that old. And I saw what he did in Oklahoma City. I'm friends with Sam Presti. I wasn't close to the tragedy once it happened because everybody shut down after that. But obviously everybody knows what happens there. And then now you see him back, and I haven't talked to him in years. But at the same time, I would imagine that his presence carries clout, and that for these young guys, his word is gospel. So how do you think he deals with this situation in terms of what it is? Because what it is unprecedented. It's not like nobody can talk. I mean, we're talking sports here, but like you're absolutely right. Nobody can know what a team is going to do in terms of handling a situation where, yeah, you're probably out of it, but you're being tasked with being a professional for 8 games, regardless of what happens.
This team has dealt with a lot this season. I mean, his first year, if you just look at it, I mean, it's between the injuries, between Ayton being suspended, 25 games to start the season, basically after the opener. You had a lot of young guys, and then when Kobe Bryant died, they didn't handle that well. You know, that was Devin Booker's guy. You know, that was an emotional situation for a lot of guys on that team, and they took that to heart, as we all did. Anybody that covers the game or follows the game or loves the game and appreciated what Kobe Bryant was, not only as a basketball player but just as a person and how he grew as a person. So, but a lot of those guys took that. You know, that really hurt them, even from not just the young guys. Ricky Rubio, he took that hard. I mean, he really was hurting over that. And so was the coach. They've dealt with quite a bit already. There is some resiliency within them to be able to handle adversity because they've dealt with it for a lot this year. He has so many references and so many things that he can draw from to get guys to lock in. But again, it's a matter of how they respond and then how the other teams respond. You know, we're talking about obviously Phoenix here, but you know, there's a lot of teams that got a lot of young guys that are meaningful guys that, you know, you mentioned obviously New Orleans with Zion, but that team is young. Sacramento, young. I think if someone can handle a young team under these conditions, he'll be just about as good as anybody in terms of doing it.
Duane, when you look at this 8th seed that everyone is fighting for, and Memphis, young team who is expected to win maybe 25 games this year, and they exceeded expectations, and they're not in the driver's seat right now. They're just in the 8th spot. You have Portland, who had a poor start to the season. They were in the Western Conference Finals last year, hanging around. But we talked about New Orleans, young team with Zion. The Kings, who are still a young team. San Antonio now without LaMarcus Aldridge. They could probably be done. I think the biggest disadvantage that Phoenix has in this whole thing is they don't get to play any of the teams ahead of them in that race for the 8th. That they get the Mavericks a few times, who will certainly clinch a playoff berth pretty soon. They get a bunch of Eastern teams, assuming those are the 8 that they play. But I think almost that's the biggest disadvantage, where New Orleans plays Sacramento twice, Memphis twice, and San Antonio. So they could make or break the 8th spot. But it really is up for grabs, because all these teams, like you said, Portland's the only proven team out of this whole group.
And Phoenix finished their season series with Portland, too. As a matter of fact, that was the last game they played. They won against Portland on the 10th, March 10th. That was their last game at Portland that they lost. So obviously those are factors. Again, I just keep going back to it. I think there's an unpredictability with all the variables, and it's on neutral sites, and it's just a lot that you just don't know how guys are going to respond when they have to play. I think what you may see is after the first couple games could be shaky for a lot of teams. And then when it's all said and done and if the team ends up in a play-in tournament, I think people will be able to go back and look at the first 2 or 3 games and go, that cost them. You can pump in all the crowd noise you want, but this is unprecedented. So how guys play and respond to that, the crowd inspires guys. Guys play at a certain level. That whole idea of, hey, somebody's watching me and I want to get put on a show, not going to have that element. They're talking about it like this is going to be a normal situation. And, okay, well, the way they played, during the season, you're going to see that. You don't know that. Memphis was, watching them before this happened, that was starting to look really special. But can they carry that over? Don't know. They got a first-year head coach. How does he handle the situation? But whereas you would think Lakers with the veterans, with the guys like LeBron, Anthony Davis, they'll be okay. Again, Clippers, veterans, Doc, veteran coach. Toronto just has such what they've built. You would think, with Lowry. Nurse obviously is a great coach, but it's like, I get the whole idea. Hey, once you get there, and it'll all be good, and you're playing, and it's like riding a bike. Okay, you don't forget. You go out, you play, and then just what you do. But you don't know how the refs are going to be in this situation. You have we got no clue how these guys are going to play until we see 2 or 3 games. And again, I think in those first 2 or 3 games could very well determine who gets in those 8. I agree with you. I think Dallas will ultimately get the 7th spot. But man, this is going to be odd on a lot of levels, and it's just going to be unprecedented.
Duane Rankin covers the Phoenix Suns for the Arizona Republic, and the Suns are part of the 22-team field headed to Orlando at the end of July, and we'll see if the Suns can find a way to sneak into the playoffs. They got a lot of work to do, but we'll see if they can do it. Duane, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Our thanks to George Sedano from ESPN for joining us. Also, Duane Rankin of the Arizona Republic breaking down the Phoenix Suns. You can find the Bet and Collect podcast on Spotify, as well as Apple Play and Google Play and iHeartRadio, as well as CastBox. You can also find us on YouTube on the Vegas Insider channel. For Tony Mejia, I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks again for tuning in to the latest edition of the Bet and Collect podcast right here on VegasInsider.com.